Welcome to lesson 15 of our 16 lesson AI bootcamp. Before I start into the lesson itself, just want to echo the comments I made yesterday, which is we definitely will be doing a lot more with AI, learning together here on the Latticeworks Substack. This bootcamp has been really instructive in also showing what kind of approach works optimally and how we could improve so that we can actually be more effective, learn faster, and have our process result in things we can actually use as investors or fund managers on the business side. So I think in the future, what we're going to do is have more modular lessons where we get to an end result faster. And so I think the focus will be a little bit away from kind of classroom style learning, which this bootcamp has felt a little bit like, even though at the end of the 16 lessons we do have some kind of a working prototype for an idea generation engine. But in the future, I really want to approach this from a practitioners and professionals standpoint even more, so that we are building things we can actually use in our process or in our firms very, very quickly. And along the way of delivering a usable product, we're gonna pause here and there to take in some lessons that'll have broader applicability. So the learning will be more woven into building things that are very practical and usable very quickly. So in terms of today's lesson, we actually are getting to something quite usable today. We're gonna test our idea generation engine end-to-end for the first time today, meaning that we will run it in Claude Code in a way from start to finish where we really don't have to touch much once we've set it up. And then in our last lesson of the bootcamp, we're basically gonna schedule this end-to-end engine to run on a regular basis that we want as investors, that we wanted to surface ideas on whatever, weekly cadence, let's say, we want to look at a bunch of ideas from this particular engine. Now, what we're going to do before we test the end-to-end run is we want to create a specification file, a markdown file for Claude or your LLM to use. You can also use the LLM to help you create that markdown file, but basically a specification file is something where we codify some of our approach away from the script itself. So in this particular spec file, we're going to answer 9 questions. One is the universe that we are interested in. Another is some hard exclusions that we never want to have to do manually. For example, if we don't want to have SPACs being served up as potential ideas, we specify that. These exclusions are different from the purely numerical screening criteria that are also part of the spec, where basically it's a stock screener where we put in our hard quantitative criteria. Another thing in the spec is going to be, what do we want from the narrative layer of the engine to tell us? What questions should the narrative layer answer? And then we're going to build the narrative layer. So the narrative layer is basically where we take, let's say, the 3 top ideas that were surfaced by a specific run of the engine. And surfaced meaning that the ideas passed the exclusion criteria, they passed the quantitative screening criteria, and they scored highest based on our scoring criteria or the weights that we set ourselves. And we talked about that quite a bit in the last lesson. And so let's say we get 3 ideas that bubble up to the top. Well, then we want our LLM, and we use Claude Opus, the latest version, for that work. We want it in a narrative way to go and dig deep on those 3 ideas and answer specific questions that we're interested in. This will essentially cut down a lot of the initial work we might do in diving deeper into those three ideas. Now, it doesn't mean that we're going to immediately have something actionable, but we're going to have key questions answered. And actually, in this example, in this lesson, one of the 4 questions that we want the narrative layer to answer is, what does Claude, in this case, think we as the human should then go and look into further that we can do uniquely on our own? So that's basically what we're going to do before we give this engine an end-to-end test run. And hopefully by the end of this lesson, you have something that you can actually use in your investment process, so that in the next engine we can just decide how often do we want to look at the output from this particular idea engine. I hope you'll find this lesson useful, and I'll see you soon in our last lesson of the bootcamp.